Let's learn Ashened. I don't feel so good. And welcome back to Let's Learn, the Dark Souls of Yugioh deck building shows. I'm Hardleg Joe, if ya didn't know, joined as always by my summon critter. He's a very powerful warrior. And today we are learning Ashened, the new TCG archetype that's been releasing in America over the last couple months. Isn't out in Master Duel yet, but that hasn't stopped us before. We're going to be learning these in advance so that we're prepared when it finally launches. And yeah, as that implies, I currently don't know how to play this deck. I have not read any of the cards. I know it has something to do with like a field spell, but that's about it. So we're going to be going into this blind, reading over all these cards, and I'll be using my years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience to figure out how it works. As a result, we will not be building the best Ashened deck, or even necessarily a good Ashened deck, but we will be learning how the Ashened operate and how to analyze cards in general. So whether you're new to this archetype or new to Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole, you should be able to garner some insight that'll help you in the future. Before we jump into it though, I want to give a special thanks to this episode's sponsor, PJamin04, who's a patron. They're just a patron. They joined the Patreon, they donated quite a lot, and they wanted to request this episode, and I said, sure, why not? That seems like fun. I don't know how this works. So thanks to them down in the comments, and if you want to join the Patreon yourself, consider checking out the link in the description, patreon.com/hardleggaming. Otherwise, let's go ahead and turn to Ash. So normally on this show, there's usually one kind of card we start with, one kind of card that unifies archetypes, and oftentimes I'll ask the Twitch chat to tell me what card that is. But I don't need their help this time. We're jumping right into it because I already know that this deck has a field spell, and it's very key to their strategy. I don't know exactly what it does, but it's time for us to find out together. So we're starting with Obsidian, the Ashened City. Face-up special summoned monsters your opponent controls become pyro during your turn only. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. During your end phase, you could target one copy of this card in your graveyard, place it on the bottom of your deck, then draw one card. If this card in the field zone is destroyed or banished, you can special summon one Ashened monster from your deck. Alright, interesting. So we've almost got a zombie world style thing where it turns all the monsters into a specific type, but it only works during your turn, which is unfortunate. I don't know, it's unfortunate, but kind of fortunate at the same time. Like on the one hand, it means this archetype is slightly worse, but on the other hand, it means people won't be citing this just to turn all your cards into pyro types and then stop any effect that requires you to control a specific type. So that's good. I am curious what happens if you have like this and Zombie World on the field at the same time. Is everything a zombie and a pyro, or does like the latter one override? Someone can tell me down in the chat. I don't think it'll really matter for this one. Other than that, it has a recycling effect, and it has an effect when it's destroyed. So the fact that it does both tells me there's probably going to be a mechanic that destroys this effect. You're probably going to want to do this so that you can summon an Ashened from the deck, and then you'll put another one on and you can put the old one back in the deck. So maybe you're like cycling through it. It's got some kind of thematic thing of like the town is destroyed and then rises from the ashes. Maybe? I guess we'll find out. So usually the next step after the field spell is to look at the extra deck, because the extra deck is where boss monsters live, and oftentimes the boss monster is going to be your win condition. This is going to be what the deck is centered around. However, there's kind of an exception for modern fusion decks. I've been looking at a lot of decks lately that have fusion monsters that aren't the bosses, that aren't the final payoff for what you're doing. I'm thinking Memento specifically, where it ended up being a searcher, and I think it might be the same for here. It's just a hunch, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm actually going to skip these for now. I think it's better to learn what we have in the main deck, maybe see if we have some kind of fusion spell, and then once we know that, we can see what the payoff is, and if this is the win condition, like something you'd see in Branded, or if it's more similar to Memento, where these are they're more of stepping stones or toolbox cards or utility cards that you can summon but aren't your main boss monster. Instead, we're going to go for the highest level main deck monster, which is Vados, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction. Which, just gotta say, hell of a name. Oh boy, that's exactly what I look for in Yu-Gi-Oh! Alright, so this is a Dark Pyro monster, interesting, with 2800 attack, 1500 defense, level 9, and during the main phase, if this card is in your hand, quick effect, target one card in a field zone, special summon this card to your opponent's field, and if you do, destroy that card. Then you can add to your hand or set one Ashened continuous trap from your deck. If this card is sent from your opponent's field to your graveyard, destroy all monsters on the field. You can only use each effect of this once per turn. Oh boy! Now this is unusual. This is a very interesting monster, not typical of Yu-Gi-Oh! Things. I can see how it might be a boss monster, because it does, like, have a board wipe. You're getting rid of everything your opponent controls, but you're also getting rid of everything you control. So, I don't know about that. It's kind of hard unless all your monsters float or something, or you have some way to come back from that. It doesn't feel worth it to give your opponent a monster just so you can destroy it. It's weird, this is the second time the TCG has made a deck around giving your opponent monsters. If you didn't know, Kaijus of all things were actually originally a TCG archetype as well. Now it is worth noting that while this can destroy any card in the field zone, so it might act as a little bit of destruction, you know, pretty nice. You can use it even under skill drain since it activates in the hand, but it also destroys the Ashened City, which will summon an Ashened monster directly from the deck. So how effective this is really going to depend on what we can summon from the deck, if it has a good way to deal with this, and also what continuous traps we have, because this also lets you set one from your deck. So a lot of maybes, a lot of ifs here. For now, I'm going to keep it at 1. As for the city, I should go ahead, we're going to put it at 2. At least 2 because it recycles itself. You want to get that loop started. Maybe you'll play a third one, but for now we'll just put it at 2 because it's not really a play starter. You kind of need some other card to destroy it before it can get its effect off. Now usually from here I would go over the rest of the monsters, and that is a valid line because this does, with the field spell, effectively summon one of them from the deck. But because it directly searches a continuous trap, and we only have 2 of them to go over, I figure what the hell, let's go ahead and take a little diversion and check these out first. Let's see what we can search with this to see if it might be a little bit more worth it. Starting with Ashened for Eternity. That's a great album name. Great album cover. I would listen to this. When this card is activated, you can add 1 Vados the Eruption Dragon of Extinction or 1 Ashened monster from your graveyard to your hand. You can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls that you own, take control of that monster. Then you can make all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls lose attack equal to the targeted monster's original attack. This attack change lasts until the end of this turn. You can only use this effect of Ashened for Eternity once per turn, and you can only activate 1 per turn. That's not great. Maybe if it added from the deck, that would be better. Adding it from your graveyard to your hand is not as good, although if you're going to blow up your Vados dragon, like, then you can get it back, or you can get back whatever monsters you ended up losing. Should be good either way. Although that kind of, you know, I was really hoping that this would have a way to destroy the dragon to trigger the effect, but instead it lets you take control of it, which is weird because this doesn't do anything while you have control of it. It's just a big 2800 beater. Maybe these do something to protect it? I assumed this would be a deck about, like, summoning this to your opponent's side of the field and then destroying it to get some kind of benefit. But maybe you're stealing it instead? Either way, there might be some times when this is useful, so we'll play it at 1 because it's searchable. It's possible this will be a 3 of, but not feeling too great on this. Definitely not playing it at more than 1. Let's see if it's the same for the other continuous trap, Ashened to Endlessness. During the main phase, you can fusion summon 1 Pyro Fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from either field as material, as long as you include Vados the Eruption Dragon. And if you do, it gains 500 attack for each material used. You can banish this card and one Dark Pyro monster from your graveyard. All monsters your opponent currently controls become Pyro until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Ashened to Endlessness once per turn. Alright, that's a little bit more like it. So now we can fusion summon using the thing on their field. And let's real quick, is this if it's destroyed? If this card is sent from your opponent's field to the graveyard, you can destroy. Alright, alright. So you put this on their side of the field, you blow up their field spell, or your field spell, and then as soon as their turn starts, you can make some kind of a fusion monster. Now how good that is really going to depend on what the materials are for this. We have a way to turn all their monsters into Pyros during our turn, and this can turn all their monsters into Pyros during their turn, but only if it's in the graveyard. So maybe something like Foolish Burial Goods might be great to set up the combo with this, but it's really going to depend. Okay, so instead of going into the monsters, we now have to take another detour. Might as well look at these fusion monsters. Now that we know how we're going to fusion summon them, how good this card is will depend on these. And let's just start with the biggest one, Vados, the Dragon of Endless Darkness. So this is another Dark Pyro monster, 3000 attack, 1700 defense, and a level 10. It takes Vados, the Eruption Dragon, and 2 level 9 or lower Pyro monsters. Alright, so you specifically have to use Pyro monsters, which means unless there's some other way to turn their monsters into Pyros during your turn, or maybe some way to put this into the graveyard, probably not as good. Although you can still at least use your monsters. So like you pop the field spell, you get to summon one, you summon this, and then if you have another one, you can make this, because it takes at least 3 monsters. And then you don't have to worry so much about your... Well, I guess you might have to worry about your cards being destroyed. Cannot be destroyed by card effects. Okay, good. If this didn't have this, then I would consider this archetype a complete failure. But yeah, so now you can use it as fusion material with your monsters, destroys your opponent's field, you get this, which isn't destroyed, and then let's see what else it does. Also, your opponent can't target it with monster effects. Nice. If this card is fusion summoned, you can destroy all spell traps your opponent controls. When your opponent activates a card or effect on the field, quick effect, send one face-up Ashened card you control to the graveyard, destroy that card. You can only use each effect once per turn. Alright, very interesting. So it's a complete board wipe. Destroys all their monsters and all their spell traps. It also destroys all your monsters, so unless you have some way to float, keeping an Ashened card on the field is going to be difficult. Although if you do still have the city, then you can blow up the city and summon one of these during the opponent's turn, which is pretty nice. And then in addition to that, it has a quick effect destruction. It's more like a ghost ogre than a negate, which is not as strong, but considering the fact that this is like an entire field wipe on summon, it didn't really even need a quick effect negate on top of that. Granted, it's still 3 materials, a little bit hard to judge, but I was wrong at the beginning. This is definitely the win condition. Although I think we were still right to go through things the way we did starting in the main deck, because I would not have had all the context for this if we didn't go through it this way. So I'm seeing what you got, I'm seeing what you got. I'm gonna go ahead and put this at 2. I'm thinking 2 because you need to have 1 in the graveyard in order to make the most use out of the fusion. The problem is if we don't have any way to send it, it's not really useful. If any of these like discards or sends a trap to the graveyard or has like some effect similar to that, then this is definitely going to be a 3 of. As it stands, it's still a 1 of, even though this is a good payoff. Now, in addition to that, they have a second fusion monster, which is Embers of the Ashened. It's only level 8, another Dark Pyro with 2900 attack, 2400 attack, and it takes 2 Pyro monsters. So you can use the Vados, I believe even though it says it's a dragon, it's a Pyro type. So this and any of your monsters, if you can't get 3 on, any 2 will make this. You can also use it with 2 of your monsters. If they happen to be playing something like Snake Eyes, then you can use their monsters then. And let's see what this effect is. If this card is fusion summoned, target one field spell in your graveyard, add it to your hand. At the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's pyro monster, destroy that opponent's monster. And if it is your turn, this card can make a second attack in a row. Alright, so another thing that would be much more powerful if we could turn things into pyros during our opponent's turn. Although if they have a Vados during your turn, you're going to attack, destroy it by battle, and then its effect will trigger, which destroys this. Unlike the other fusion, this monster is not immune to being destroyed, and has no floating effect either. So, kind of weird. Although, you know, if nothing else, because you have the field spell and you're most likely going to be adding it to the graveyard when this is summoned, this is going to be able to kill anything on your opponent's side of the field, essentially. Because all their monsters will be pyros, and then you can just attack again. So, pretty nice for going in for damage, a nice, like, you know, turn 2 card. This is something that's, like, powerful enough where it's like, oh, maybe we'll play this at 2, we might want to summon this multiple times in a duel. This definitely feels like a one-of. This is something that, like, you go for game when you know you have game, and not a moment earlier. Alright, so now that we got that done, let's go back through our tangents, through the Fusion Woods, over the River of Continuous Traps, and back to the monsters, starting with the highest level monster, King of the Ashened City. Look at him, he's like, stand back, Steven Universe, I've got this. This is another Dark Pyro monster, 1400 attack, 2700 defense, level 8, and real quick, is everything in this deck a Dark Pyro monster? Dark Pyro, Dark Pyro, Dark Pyro. Okay, so the whole deck is Dark Pyro. If we had to worry about floodgates like Rivalry, this might be able to play underneath them, but not Tikaboo. I guess a small thing to keep in mind, but interesting nonetheless. I guess since everything is Pyro, we can use Bonfire with the lower level ones. That's a good thing to keep in mind. Anyway, if the Ashened City is in the field zone, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon once per turn this way. During your main phase, you could special summon one Ashened monster from your hand, except King of the Ashened City. Or if your opponent controls a monster with 2800 or more attack, you could special summon it from the deck instead. You can only use this effect once per turn. Alright, so it's a free special summon. Only 1400 attack, so not great, and the 2700 defense means it won't be able to stand up against the Vados. But if you give your opponent Vados, then you can summon anything from the deck. That's a pretty good effect, although it relies on you having, like, the city to summon it and Vados, so kind of a combo. Not necessarily sure if we want to play this at more than one. See, that's the thing. Usually if you have a card that searches from the deck or summons from the deck, that's an instant 3 of. But when there's so many conditions tacked onto that, it becomes less and less likely. Because now if you open up with a hand that's like, you know, 3 Vados, 3 of this, or I guess 2, 2, and your 2 traps, you're just screwed. There's absolutely nothing you can do. If this was like a level 4, it might be a little bit different. But for the moment, we're going to put it at 1. If it turns out that like every other card in the archetype searches the city, then we could probably put this. And actually, you know, just to be safe, we're going to go and put this at 3 now, just because it makes it more likely that you don't brick on this. Alright, next up, Hero of the Ashened City. Another Dark Pyro, of course. I don't know why I'm even mentioning that. Just for now on, they're all Dark Pyros. This one has 2600 attack, 2100 defense. So, pretty sizable attack this time, although it still can't get over the dragon. And if the Ashened City is in the field zone, you can special summon this from your hand. You can only do this once per turn. Alright, real quick, does every Ashened monster have that effect? Let's check real quick. If it's in the city, you can special summon this. If it's in the field zone, you can summon this. If it's in the field zone. Okay, so yeah, you absolutely want to play this at 3, because if you get this, you can just summon everything from your hand. So, pretty good. I was worried, I was like, it doesn't search, it's not as great, but the fact that it can do that now makes it worth it. Although, it makes this effect even weirder, where it's like, yeah, if your opponent doesn't have Vados, you could summon something from your hand. It's like, well, they can already summon from the hand. I guess it's good if the city gets destroyed. Anyway, let's look at the rest of this effect. During your main phase, quick effect, target one Pyro on the field, destroy it. Then if you destroyed Vados the Eruption Dragon, you can place one Ashened City from your deck face up in your field zone. You can only use this effect once per turn. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. So I guess at least if you're going second and your opponent has stuff, I was like, oh, this is a great way to trigger the field wipe, but when would you be able to do that? You would need to have, like, your opponent would need to have nothing, and if they have nothing, what's the point of destroying the dragon? I feel like you don't really want to destroy the dragon. Granted, if you have the field spell, everything your opponent controls is a pyro, so this is just like pointing at any card and destroying it. So it's probably still worth playing at least one, if nothing else, for the attack stat. But like the other guy, because it's a big, huge tribute monster that requires other things on the field in order to function, I think you just want to play it at one and search it when you need it. Summon out of the deck if you need to pop and destroy something. Oh yeah, chat is pointing out that is a quick effect. So if you're up against a Pyro deck, you know, this is a great way to stop Snake Eyes yet again. Or if you find some way to get this into the graveyard, you can use this during your opponent's turn, banish it, all their stuff becomes Pyro. Who knows, you maybe even play, there's an old continuous trap called, I think, DNA Surgery, that lets you change the type of all monsters on the field. So maybe that might be worth playing in this deck just to screw over your opponent and make your things more worthwhile. I don't know, it's unsearchable, and I really don't like having to rely on floodgates, but who knows, maybe this deck will need it. So far it has promise, but I don't think you can rely entirely on a field wipe to do everything for you. Some of these cards are going to have to do something else. Okay, next up we have Spearhead of the Ashened City. 1700 attack, just 100 defense. It's a level 4, so we can normal summon this one if we want to. Has the same effect to special summon, and if your opponent controls a monster with 2800 or more attack, you can tribute this card, target one card your opponent controls, return it to the hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. Alright, interesting. So it already has a little advantage by being a level 4, and it's kind of generic removal. I mean, it requires a monster with 2800 or more attack, which means you can use it with Vados, and unlike some of these other cards, this will return it to your hand, so its effect won't trigger. You won't wipe your own board. But it's also good against a lot of other boss monsters. You know, if your opponent has like a Zeus, if your opponent has like a Barone, this is something you could just like normal summon, activate the effect, and they either have to negate it or their monster gets bounced back to the extra deck. So pretty useful. I'm not sure if it's useful enough to play it more than one, like a lot of these cards, but still pretty neat for a normal summon. We have two other possibilities. If these aren't like Searchers or some really great card, this might be something worth playing at 2 or even 3. Alright, once again, the chat pointing out some nuance here. It says, if your opponent controls a monster with 2800 or more attack, you can target one card they control. It doesn't have to be that monster. It can be any monster, it can be any card. If they have a floodgate of some kind, you could try to send that back. I'm not sure, most floodgates are going to shut down your effects or stop you from summoning anyway, but it's good that they have that possibility. I'm just thinking something like Runic Fountain. You could try to send that back to their hand. Then they can't activate any more of their runic spells, and they can't protect it because it doesn't destroy. Just a neat little quirky, you know, if nothing else, if you're playing this in the TCG, might be worth putting a couple in the side deck just for some niche interactions like that. Gets around skill drain because it tributes for cost. Good point. Okay, next up, we have another level 4. This time it only has 1300 attack, 1200 defense, the regular Ashen summon effect, and you can target 3 of your Pyro monsters that are banished and or in the graveyard, shuffle them into the deck. Then, if you shuffled an Ashened monster, you can add one Ashened City from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. Alright, recycling is always good. Although, so far, we don't have a whole lot of ways to, like, banish stuff. I guess that's good because it means, like, if they get rid of your Vados or any of your one-ofs, you have ways to get them back, whether they're in the graveyard or banished. But it's still, anytime you've got a recycling effect, it's usually not a 3-of. It's usually something you want to see later in the game once you have stuff in the graveyard. So unless one of these effects, like, automatically sends 3 to the graveyard, I can't imagine wanting to play more than one of these. Although it does search the field spell, but again, you have to have setup. So it's really relying on this final card. Hopefully Priestess of the Ashened City really comes through. This is another level 4 with 1200 attack, 1300 defense, normal summoning thing, and if this card is normal or special summoned, add one Ashened card from your deck to your hand. You can only use this once per turn. Alright, we've got a Stratos. The deck's not completely useless. And this is a level 4 Pyro, which means Bonfire? I typed in Bonefire. Bonfire. Yeah, there we go. Add one level 4 lower Pyro. There we go. Although we're playing in Master Duel format, so this is going to be at least 2. But good to know that you have 3 of this, technically 5 copies, because Bonfire becomes one of these. And then this can search the field spell, or any of your other cards if you need them. Still kind of wary on monsters. We might have to search some other Pyros and see what we could do. Or maybe we just run like more of these to fill in cards in the deck. Maybe some of these add some more consistency so you can play some of the higher level ones. But so far, it's looking like you're going to have some trouble with field presence. Unless you're playing a bunch of these that just don't do anything, just to have bodies on board. There is still hope with the spells, though, so let's go ahead and go through those, starting with our normal spell, Extinguishing the Ashened. Sounds like this would stop your deck from functioning. I mean, he doesn't look like he's having a good time. It's hard to tell. He's got that steam coming off of him. That could be a sign of many different things. Alright, send one Dark Pyro from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can add one level 5 or higher Pyro from your graveyard to your hand. For the rest of this turn, after this resolves, you cannot special summon from the extra deck, except Pyro monsters. You can banish this card from your graveyard, fusion one Pyro monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as material. You can only use one per turn. Alright, so this searches all the high-level monsters. So we don't have to use it necessarily on Priestess. It does lock you into Pyros, though, and I'm not sure how many Pyros there are in this game. This is definitely something that, like, if there's some good options in the extra deck for, like, Pyro links, then maybe this is worth it. Otherwise, I'm not so sure. It doesn't search Vados, because Vados isn't an Ashened card. No, it's a level 5 or higher Pyro. I stand corrected. This does search Vados. It searches all of these. Very tricky indeed. This is a tricksy deck, to be sure. Lots of interlinking parts, and I'm not sure exactly how well they link together. Okay, next up we have a quick play spell, Awakening of Vados. Not an Ashened card, but so far we don't have any way to... Oh wait, does this search any Ashened monster or any Ashened card? Ashened card, okay. So we can't add this one because it's not Ashened. Place one Ashened City from your deck in either field zone. Then if your opponent controls a card in their field zone, add one level 5 or higher Dark Pyro from your deck to your hand. For the rest of the turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon from the deck or extra deck except Pyros, and you can only activate once per turn. Alright, but we still do this, right? We still absolutely play 3 of this, because this gets everything going. You activate this, and it puts the field spell in your opponent's zone. Then you get to add Vados, because it's any level 5 or higher Dark Pyro. Then Vados destroys this, and even though it was destroyed on your opponent's field, because it got sent to your graveyard, you get to summon any Ashened from the deck, so you can get Priestess. Priestess gets... fuck. Anything else? That's the question. You need another Ashened, I think. I mean, you could get either of these. I mean, you're locked into Pyros, but it's looking more... If this locks you into Pyros, then it's probably worth playing this, just as more search power. And we're just going to have to deal with the fact that we're locked into Pyros, because there's no way you don't play this. Okay, finally that just leaves us with our last spell, also a quick play, which is Rekindling the Ashened. Place one of your Ashened cards that is banished or in the graveyard on the bottom of your main deck, except another copy of itself. Then target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of the turn, You can only activate one per turn. Very interesting. So it is a quick effect monster negate, which is usually pretty good. You know, there's a reason Imperm gets played a lot. The fact that it's a quick play means you can use it on your turn going second, or set it and use it during the opponent's turn. It does have a cost, which kind of sucks, but it's a very, very low cost, and it recycles your cards in the process. You're almost always going to be able to activate that as long as you've got at least one card in the graveyard. And it also is searchable, but only with her, and I'm guessing you're going to want to use her on other stuff. It's possible we want to play more than one of these. I feel like you're better off just playing Imperm 90% of the time, but because it is searchable, there's a chance you open with, like, the field spell, and Vados, and King, and you have nothing you want to search with this, so it's like, might as well get Rekindling of the Ashes. I'll put 2 in the side deck, just in case, you know, maybe it turns out we do want to run more of these, but I think it's probably just good at 1, maybe even 0. And that's all the Ashened cards, and from here there's a couple different ways we could go, but I think the obvious choice is to look into the extra deck. We know that this deck has the ability, once you get the field spell, to just spam all the monsters onto the field. It might be worth playing King at 3, just because it summons anything out of the deck if you have the field spell, and we now have 1, 2, 3 different cards that get you the field spell on the first turn. Real quick, if it's in the field zone, so it doesn't matter whose field zone, you can summon this. So you don't necessarily want to pop this with Vados right away. You could put this in your opponent's zone. If you have King, you summon it, then you get something from the deck, then you pop it with Vados, you get something else. This has the ability to spam a whole lot of monsters, but we're locked into Pyros. So how good this deck is going to rely on what other Pyros that we can make. So let's go ahead and use this function. We can tell it to search for only Pyro monsters, and let's just go ahead and do links. It's possible that we can make Ixies. Yeah, I guess we can do Ixies as well, because we have 3 level 4s, so there's that. These 2 are all different levels, so they don't really help. We don't have any tuners. We might be able to add those, but I don't think it's really worth it. And, oh yeah, I gotta remove the thing. That can't be all. Are those all the Pyro links and Ixies? That's it? I could have swore there were more. Well, I guess I'm gonna read over them really quick, and I'll see if any of them are good, but ooh, that is not looking great. Alright, that didn't take nearly as long as it usually does, because a lot of these are just not even possible to summon. Like, we could technically summon this, it's 2 level 8s, but we only have 1 level 8, and you can only special summon it once per turn. So you'd have to summon this, wait until next turn, summon another one, and then you can overlay him for Garunik's Eternity, but I don't think it's worth it. The only ones we can easily make are these 2 level 4s, and they're decent. You know, this one can detach to take a Pyro monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. It has an additional effect that doesn't matter, but it just means that if you get any 2 of these, you can then search any other Pyro monster, so it's a way to get King if you don't already have it. And then Infernal Flame Vixen. This is once per turn. You can detach 1 material. This card gains 500 until your opponent's end phase. And when this card with 2500 or more attack is destroyed, target 3 monsters in any graveyard, banish those targets. This has the potential to be really funny, because you've already got a board wipe, right? Like, Vados is going to be popped and destroy every monster on the field. Then you're going to summon this and destroy all your opponent's spell traps. And then if this was on the field and got popped by Vados, its effect will trigger, and you can banish all the cards out of their graveyard, or at least 3 of them. The only potential problem with this is that it's a mandatory effect. You can't choose to do it, it's just when this card is destroyed, target 3 graveyard cards in any graveyard, banish those. And because it can affect your graveyards too, that means if, like, they just Raigeki you, or Dark Hole you or something, you have to banish your own monsters. Now, granted, we have ways to get them back. In fact, every recycling thing that we have lets us get back banished monsters, so it's not that big of a deal, but it definitely could backfire on you a little bit. Other than that, none of the rest of these are any good. The 2 links require specific materials, Prank Kids and Gold Pride, and you don't want to combine either of those with this deck. We don't have level 2s. This can let an Ixie monster attack directly, but there's no way we're putting 4 level 4s on the field. Even if we did, well, we're going to attack directly for 2,500. That's not worth it. Now, there is one other potential saving grace, because I just remembered that this lets you fusion summon a Pyro Fusion. So we looked at the links, we looked at the Ixies. I didn't think to look at fusions. Are there any good Pyro Fusions? There are. In Rush Duels. I forgot to filter out for the Rush Duel cards. 1 second. Alright, okay, we have a couple. So there's a couple more things to look through. Give me a moment, I'll look through these as well and see if we have any other targets. Alright, so unfortunately none of the Pyro Fusions really do anything either. There's this cool one, but its material requires a specific Synchro monster, so that ain't happening. I don't think we're gonna play King of the Swamp just for that. Although, I mean, that would make sure we don't have to get Vados necessarily, although we want to use Vados. I am going to put 2 more of these in because it's any Pyro monster, and considering how reliant we are on this, I'm just going to go ahead and say that one of our tech cards we're going to be using is Super Poly. We're just going to play 3 Super Poly, why not? You know, this allows us going second. We could get Obsidian, we could put this here. We may be locked during our turn, but we're not locked during our opponent's turn, which means we can play Mud Dragon of the Swamp. We can play Garuda, is that its name? No, Garura, there we go. We could play Starving Venom. I mean, we've got 2 dark monsters, there's a chance we might want to make this. We also might have fusion monsters, so I guess Drago Stapelia. I mean, why not? We're not going to be making a whole lot of other stuff. Granted, not everything we have locks us into Pyros, but so much does that I almost feel like it's not worth getting the rest of the extra deck in there. But we might as well just fill it in. I mean, stuff like SP and IP are things that we can use if we can just get 2 monsters on board before the lock. Real quick again, for the rest of the turn after this resolves, okay, so we can make like an SP or an IP beforehand and then use this. What was the other thing that locked us? Yeah, Extinguish of the Ashened, and this is also after it resolves. So we can't be making huge link plays because all of our cards that let us extend crazy are ones that lock us into Pyros, but we can still make like a couple little like link plays and then maybe do some stuff. Being able to end, especially something like IP, now that I think about it, like the monster can't be destroyed by by your opponent's card effects. Damn. So even if we do something with IP, it'll be destroyed by Vados when it hits the grave, because it's our own effect and not our opponent's effect. Unfortunate. But still might be worth it, if nothing else, just to, again, make SP, which is like the best generic removal in the game. And then the last 2 slots, we just put Dark, because we're on all Dark monsters, being able to get something back. And then I guess Underworld, that might be good removal. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe something like Access Code might be good. Just to help us like OTK. We get something. We would need like a Link 3 or something too. Okay, maybe get rid of that and play the dang old Unicorn. Just get Unicorn into Access. We might need that with Dehark. Might work out. You know, we're not going to be going into the extra deck a lot. We're going to be mostly doing stuff with our main deck, it feels like. And if we are, we're going to be making the big Vados Fusion Dragon. Now from here, we need to fill out the rest of the main deck, and though it pains me, this deck is not something where I feel like we can rely entirely on just its playstyle. I feel like you're going to need generic hand traps if you want to stand any will to survive. So let's go ahead and do the same old song and dance. There we go, the Master Duel attacks. Ash Blossom, Maxi, called by, cross out. Granted, we don't need to special summon a lot, so this deck, ironically, is not as susceptible to Maxi. We can do some plays during our opponent's turn, and us getting set up is as easy as, like, summoning Vados, maybe normal summoning this. So, you know, we might be good not playing Ash Blossom, but we're still going to need something to stop our opponents, and might as well be this, you know, we're used to it anyway. Now that just leaves us with 4 slots left, and I think if it were entirely up to me, I would just fill this with more generic hand traps, just try to get more disruption here. But we do have a woeful lack of main deck monsters, and a couple people in chat, including the guy who requested this, is saying we need to play more Vados. So I'm going to go ahead and trust them. And there we go. We have a pretty solid pool of monsters, a lot of consistency tools to help get those monsters on the field, and a small stable of like tech cards and hand traps and board breakers that should help us. From there, it's just a matter of seeing if we can get to our win condition. With this, we do have a very specific set of circumstances we want to set up, which is Vados on the opponent's side of the field, with the Ashened to Endlessness set, and 2 Pyros on our field. Perhaps one of those Pyros could be Infernal Flame Vixen, and then we could get the Banish as well. So I'm going to mess around with the test feature, see if I can figure out some combos. As always, if you're doing this on your own, trying to figure out the deck, trying to learn new combos, I can't recommend enough that you check out the solo mode on Master Duel. Or I guess this program, if you have Yugioh Omega, you could download this for free from their Discord. Just search it on Google, you should be able to find it. But even if you're just using official resources, Master Duel solo mode is great for that. You know, you sit down, low pressure environment, and just try to figure out your combos. And if you can't beat the solo mode, then you don't even stand a chance on the ladder. I wouldn't even bother going to the ladder. I would just go back to the drawing board and try to figure out what you're doing first before taking it against actual opponents. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna test it out with the test hand mode, and I'll come back once I've figured out some combos. Alright, so after testing out the deck for a little bit, trying to figure out how it works, I think I have concocted a neat little 2-card combo that, if nothing else, gives you a board wipe. Not necessarily sure if that's good enough in the modern day and age, but, you know, it's not too bad. And granted, 2 cards, you know, you would prefer to see a 1-card combo in 2024, but the 2 cards are, like, pretty easy, because it's basically Priestess, or any way to get to her. You know, Bonfire gets this, so you've got 5 ways, plus either Vados or the Field Spell. Because whichever one you don't have, you can grab with her. Like, you can either grab the Field Spell directly, and while this isn't an Ashened card, you can always get Extinguish of the Ashened, and this is just like, send a Dark Pyro from your deck to the graveyard, and then add a level 5 or higher from your graveyard to your hand. So this essentially gets you Vados. So either way, you're getting to your combo. So there's a lot of different ways to get to it. But either way, you're going to end up with the Field Spell and this in hand. Activate the Field Spell, then you activate Vados, pop in the Field Spell, and summon him himself over here. We get to add or set the continuous trap, so we're going to get Ashen to Endlessness, our fusion card. And then because this was destroyed, we can summon a monster from the deck. So let's go ahead and get King of the Ashen City. And really, this is all you need, but we might as well go ahead. We're going to activate this and summon out Hero of the Ashen City. If you forget, this is the one that has a quick effect to destroy a Pyro monster. So if your opponent happens to be on Snake Eyes or Volcanic or any kind of Pyro deck, then you've got a free quick effect pop. Otherwise, this isn't really doing a whole lot. I guess there's also a chance that, like, they hit your back row with something, Harpy's Feather Duster or Cosmic Cyclone, in which case, then you still have the ability to wipe the field, if not all their spell traps, by targeting this and blowing it up when it's least convenient. For now, though, we're just going to pass. Our opponent's going to do some stuff, but because it's the bot, all it's going to do is summon a Kozaki, which is not very much, but it's still enough to show what you do. You activate this, and now you can fusion summon the big fusion Vados with this, this, and this. Whoosha! And then when this goes to the graveyard, you can destroy all monsters on the field, and when this is summoned, it destroys all spell traps on the field. So if you time this right, if you don't allow your opponent to make links or anything, you're just blowing up the entire field. This will stay the same, and you've got a 4,500 beater that can then go in for other stuff. And assuming you have other cards, hand traps, other monsters, you should be able to go into game for there. Now, in addition to that, there is actually a 1-card combo. Unfortunately, it relies on getting specifically Awakening of Vados, which is like the one spell trap in your deck that you can't search. So it's like, hey, if you get lucky and get this, you're golden, because you're going to do everything that you did last time, but even more. You go one step further beyond. And if you get this plus some of the cards previously, you could do even more stuff. But I'll go ahead and show this off while we're doing it. So you're going to activate this, and it's going to get you the field spell, and you're going to place it in your opponent's zone, and then you get to add a monster, and you're of course going to add Vados. Good old Vados dragon. So then you're going to activate this, you're going to pop their field spell, summon this here, what do you know? And we're going to go ahead and add our trap, in this case just Endlessness again. And then when this triggers, we're going to go ahead and summon the king from the deck. Because remember, his effect just says if your opponent has a monster with 2800 or more, you can summon from the deck. So now you can get Priestess, and when Priestess is summoned, you get to search. And it turns out, oh hey, what do you know? We have this quick effect monster negate. So now we have everything we had before. You know, we can destroy all their monsters and all their spell traps, and we have Imperm on top of that, because we can shuffle back the Ashened City in order to negate one monster our opponent controls. And that's probably worth it. Alternatively, you could get another level 4 and normal summon it and get some stuff. I'm sure there's a way, like I said before, to get Flame Vixen and then be able to banish your opponent's monsters as well, especially if you start with like Awakening of Vados plus like a Priestess already in hand. The problem, of course, is that like there's nothing here that says this can't be linked off. So they could just like normal summon anything, link this off, and then they're blowing up like your entire field, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because yeah, if this card is sent from your opponent's field to your graveyard, destroy all monsters on the field. It would really be nice if this had some kind of contingency that says like, you know, your opponent can't use this as extra deck material. The other alternative, you know, if they have a high level monster, they could tribute over it. If they have, I guess, Dark Hole, that's not really likely. The one good thing about this combo is once you've done this, like you've locked them out of Evenly, and you've locked them out of Imperm, and with everything like in defense position, like they can attack with this, but they're not going to be able to crash it and then evenly match you. So it really does feel like a meta call. If you're in a meta with a lot of pyro monsters and a lot of board breakers, this might be good. If you're going up against something like, I'm not super familiar with Tenpai, but I don't think they can do links. I think they're kind of locked into synchros. Putting this on their board might screw with them, especially if you have a negate, especially if you have the ability to fusion and non-targeting destroy everything. But the deck really does seem like a one-trick pony, and unfortunately that trick is pretty easy to play around once you know what you're doing. But at least it has something. You know, there have been decks I've played before, like Battle and Boxers, where I didn't even know what the win condition was. Being able to nuke your opponent's field and put on a 4500 untargetable, undestructible monster with a quick effect destruction, that's pretty dang powerful. It's just easy for experienced players to play around. But as a casual deck, pretty fun, pretty neat. So yeah, overall, a very interesting deck, a lot of potential, but like so many TCG decks, it just feels a little undercooked. And while I could sit here, mess around with it, maybe look into Pyro Synchros, maybe see if there's other decks that have synergy with it, it really just feels like it's waiting for that one or two more cards to come in and just bust it wide open. Really, all we need is like Pyro extra deck monsters. This is a deck that is going to benefit in the future, not just from like specific Ashened cards, but just any extra deck link that happens to be Pyro type. Because the fact that it locks you into Pyros and there's so few of them is like the most limiting thing. So if we ever get another Pyro archetype or even just generic cards, this is going to be able to get a lot more powerful. So for now, I'm going to leave it at that. I think I understand the basics of it, and hopefully even if it does get support, it won't change it too much. You'll still have a basic understanding. It's really just going to depend on, you know, if we get another searchable spell that's a little bit more powerful, that makes Priestess a lot better. If we get another monster that has like a quick effect, something we can summon out of the deck with King, that makes him a whole lot better. You can really make this end board a lot more robust with just one or two cards. For now, though, I think I'm going to end it here. thank you all for coming out. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did learn something, remember to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Let me know that you enjoyed this and I'll make some more of them. And thank you once more to the patron who requested this. I always like going out of my comfort zone, checking out these new archetypes that aren't in Master Duel yet, so I'm prepared when they finally showed up. Otherwise, until next time, good luck and have fun.